Hey guys, tonight we're headed to the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee, where the sky is still bruised with the last shades of night. It's quiet here. So quiet, in fact, that you can hear the creak of wood on water, the soft groan of men shifting in a boat, and the occasional disappointed splash of a net that comes up empty. The air smells faintly of fish and lakeweed, which sounds awful, I know. But out here it somehow works. You're with the disciples now, or at least 7 of them. Peter, Thomas, Nathaniel, James, John, and 2 others whose names don't make the final cut for this morning's cast list. It's been a strange few weeks, to say the least. Jesus, your teacher, your miracle-working friend, your foot-washing leader, has been crucified, buried, and risen again. You've seen him a couple of times already, but no one really knows what's next. So Peter does what any self-respecting Galilean fisherman might do when his brain can't untangle the theology of resurrection. He goes fishing, and you go with him. Because when your world has been flipped like a fish on hot stone, a boat feels like the one thing that still makes sense. But tonight, nothing's biting, not even a polite nibble. You and the guys have cast and pulled, until your arms ache and your stomach grumbles, and you're starting to seriously regret not bringing extra dried figs. Welcome to the biblical version of "This is fine." So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. Is it midnight in Manitoba? Dawn in Durban? I love hearing how far this little sleepy storytelling community reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in the boat now, curled near the stern, trying not to let your foot fall asleep under someone else's cloak. The water sloshes softly against the hull, and the only real excitement tonight has been James nearly falling overboard while swatting at a mosquito. Galilee looks different in the dark, broader maybe. The hills beyond the shore are hunched and still. Every once in a while, a little breeze skips over the water, just enough to make the sail flap lazily and remind you that time is still moving, even if the fish are not. It's a little cold. Not quite bone-chilling, but enough that you start pulling your outer tunic tighter around you, fingers flexing to keep warm. And in this long stretch of aimless casting and pulling, your mind drifts. You think about the things Jesus said, the way he looked at people, like he already knew the thing they were most ashamed of and still wanted to eat dinner with them. Anyway, you remember bread multiplying in your hands, storms that listened when he scolded them, and the way he once told you to follow him, which you did. Mostly. Theologians still debate whether this Galilee fishing trip was a symbol of regression or just a need for comfort food. But out here in the boat, it doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like breathing, and just when the sky begins to smudge with lavender, when your stomach officially files a complaint, someone notices a figure on the shore. It's too early for beachgoers, too cold for swimmers. You all squint at this distant shape. He's standing near the waterline, hands behind his back, head tilted slightly. A little ember glow flickers near his feet. Must be a fire. You can't make out his vase, but he calls out across the water in that casual uncle at a barbecue tone. "Friends, did you catch anything?" Peter snorts. "No," he calls back, which, to be honest, is a very kind version of the grumbling you all wanted to say. "Throw your net on the right side of the boat," the man calls, "and you'll find some." There's a beat of silence. You exchange a glance with Thomas, who raises one eyebrow like, "Sure, why not?" You throw the net over, mostly just to humor the guy, and then it happens. The net jerks. Not a little tug, not a polite splash. This is full-on chaos. The ropes strain, the boat tilts, and the water around the net fizzes with life. You grip the edge of the hull, blinking. Fish, so many fish. Peter freezes. Then his mouth opens slowly, like a man suddenly remembering a dream he once lived. "It's the Lord," he whispers, and just like that, everything tilts again. Peter, true to form, does something spectacularly impractical. He puts his outer garment on because, of course, swimming fully dressed is peak disciple behavior, and dives into the water. You watch as he flails toward shore, his cloak billowing out behind him like a soggy superhero cape. The rest of you stay in the boat, probably because someone has to manage the physics of not tipping over while hauling in what will turn out to be 153 fish, an oddly specific number that biblical scholars have written entire essays about. The most convincing theory: ancient fishermen just really liked counting things. As you inch closer to shore, the details come into focus. The man is Jesus. Risen, yes. Glorious, maybe. But mostly there. Calm, smiling, and for some reason, making breakfast. The fire crackles low. A few fish sizzle gently on hot coals. There's a stack of flatbread warming beside them. Jesus motions toward the food. You drag the net up beside him, still stunned by the weight of it, still dripping from the waist down. He looks at you the way only Jesus can look, like he knows your night was empty and still wants to feed you. And just as your stomach growls again, he speaks. "Come and have breakfast." No trumpets, no lightning, just fish, bread, and the Son of God acting like it's the most normal thing in the world, and suddenly it is. The fire pops softly as you step onto the pebbled shore, water dripping from your robe and sandals squishing with each step. The others are right behind you, hauling that net so packed with fish it looks like a writhing silver carpet. You don't know what's stranger, that Jesus is making breakfast, or that he's acting like it's just any other morning. The wind shifts and carries with it the sharp, warm scent of charcoal, real charcoal, not the quick light festival kind, and grilled fish. You can smell the oil, the faint salt, the crisp edges. It's almost enough to make you forget you just spent the whole night catching nothing but cold feet. Jesus stands, and without ceremony, he starts dividing the fish onto flat stones. He gestures to the net. "Bring some of the fish you just caught." Peter, still dripping from his hero's dive, practically sprints over to the pile and grabs a few large ones, plopping them beside the fire with a sort of reverent clumsiness. You glance around. No one's really talking. There's a quiet buzzing tension in the air, not the anxious kind, but the kind that hangs when everyone is wondering the same thing and no one wants to be the first to say it. Because this is Jesus, resurrected Jesus, and yet he's just here, serving fish, flipping flatbread, not glowing, not hovering, no thunder, no sermon, just a man making you breakfast. Theologians still debate why Jesus chose this moment, why he didn't appear to a larger crowd or stage a grand miracle, or at least throw in some thunder for dramatic effect. But maybe it's because tired people don't need drama. They need food, and someone who shows up when the nets come up empty. You lower yourself onto the sand. It's cool and slightly damp, but the fire's warmth reaches your knees. Jesus hands you a piece of fish wrapped in soft, warm bread. You say, "Thank you," like you might to a traveling uncle who stopped by unannounced and brought lunch. He smiles. You eat, and for a few minutes, no one says anything. The crackle of the fire fills the space. The waves slap softly against the rocks. You can hear the small rustle of birds beginning their morning gossip in the reeds. Thomas bites into his bread too fast and burns his tongue. He doesn't say anything, just makes a little face and tries to play it cool. You smirk, just a little. So does Jesus. The fish is good, better than it has any business being. Lightly salted, flaking apart perfectly, the kind of food that doesn't just feed your stomach, but tells your body it's safe again, that you're here and alive and seen. Somewhere behind you, someone hiccups from eating too fast. It might be Nathaniel, might be you. You think back to the night before, how long and pointless it felt, how every cast felt like an unanswered prayer. You remember your fingers numbing from cold rope, the dull ache in your back, the hunger in your chest, and now you're full, not just with food, with something else. Not clarity, not certainty, but presence. Jesus doesn't ask you to do anything right now, doesn't hand out commands or parables. He just keeps breaking bread and passing it around like he has all the time in the world. And maybe he does. He doesn't speak until everyone's eaten their fill. Even then, it's not a grand announcement, just a question, almost casual. "Simon, son of John," he says. You look up. Peter's chewing. He freezes mid-bite. Slowly, he lowers his bread. "Do you love me more than these?" Oof, that's a heavy one. Peter swallows hard. "Yes, Lord," he says. "You know that I love you," Jesus nods. "Feed my lambs." The moment slips into the fire's smoke. A bird calls somewhere inland. No one moves. Then again, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" Peter glances at the others like he's checking if he misheard. "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." "Take. In care of my sheep," Jesus says. You don't know if it's the repetition or the weight of the moment, but your chest feels a little tight. And then a third time, Jesus asks again, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" This time, Peter winces. You can see it, the crease of guilt across his brow, the weight of memory pressing down. It hasn't been that long since he denied even knowing Jesus, 3 times in a row by another charcoal fire. The callback isn't lost on him, or on you. Theologians still debate whether this triple questioning was meant to undo Peter's triple denial, you think, or just to rebuild him one quiet question at a time. Peter answers again, "Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you." Jesus nods. "Feed my sheep." He doesn't scold, doesn't shame. Just hands Peter his calling again, like a warm loaf of bread. You look down at your hands. They're still dusty with sand, the last bits of breakfast clinging to your fingers. You press your palms together for warmth, for stillness. The sun has fully risen now. The edge of the lake gleams like glass, and for the first time in a long time, you realize the day has begun and you're not alone. The beach feels softer now. The lights shifted again, warming everything with that early morning gold that turns wet sand into bronze and makes even a pile of empty nets look poetic. You lean back on your elbows and let your fingers sift through. The grit, small shells, bits of lakeweed, the occasional fish scale that glints like mica in the sun. Peter's still quiet, not mopey, just settled. Like something heavy inside him has finally been lifted and folded neatly into yesterday's laundry. He's staring out at the water, one hand unconsciously turning a stone over and over in his palm. Jesus walks a few steps away from the fire toward a patch of smoother sand. You all watch without really meaning to. He's not glowing, still not levitating, just walking barefoot, like a guy out for a morning stretch. He stops and looks back at Peter. "Follow me," he says again softly. The same words from the very beginning, when all of this was new and smelled more like sawdust than charcoal. Peter stands slowly, brushing sand off his knees, nodding like he doesn't entirely know what it means, but knows he's going anyway. Then, John, the one Jesus always seemed extra close to, gets up and starts walking behind them. Peter notices. He half turns to Jesus and tilts his head toward John. "Lord, what about him?" Classic Peter. Just when he's finally finding his feet, he wants to compare shoes. Jesus pauses, turns just enough to meet Peter's eyes. "If I want him to remain until I return, what is that to you? You follow me." The air holds still for a moment. That kind of stillness where truth lands in your chest like a soft rock. Not painful, but not forgettable either. It's one of those moments where Jesus gives just enough of an answer to be clear, and just enough mystery to keep theologians scribbling notes centuries later. Some say this was a hint at John's long life. Others say it was a firm, kind reminder not to get spiritual FOMO. You glance at the fire again. It's lower now. Just glowing coals and one last curl of smoke. Someone, probably Nathaniel, clears his throat. So, are we just leaving the fish? Jesus glances over his shoulder. You'll know what to do, which is not exactly a game plan, but it's very on brand for him. So you and the others start gathering the extra fish. You pile them carefully into baskets, enough to feed a village or start a barter empire. There's laughter now, light and low. Thomas is trying to name each fish. That one's Ezra. This one? Fishobeth. You can't help but smile. Somewhere, behind you, Peter and Jesus are walking side by side again, not sprinting toward destiny, just walking. You don't hear what they're saying, but you don't need to, because this morning nothing grand has happened except everything. You remember the emptiness of last night, the aching wrists, the unanswered throws, and now here you are, warm, full, with fish in your belly and sand in your sandals. Theologians still debate the placement of this story in John's Gospel, why it lands as an epilogue after the curtain. Seems to have already dropped, but maybe that's the whole point. Maybe resurrection doesn't always come with trumpets. Maybe sometimes it smells like grilled tilapia and sounds like someone asking if you want seconds. You stretch. Not the kind of stretch that means you're done, but the kind that says, okay, I guess I can keep going. John is squinting at something in the distance. He shades his eyes. Do you think we'll see him again like this? No one answers. Not right away, because you all know the truth, probably not like this. But also maybe the sun's climbing higher now, burning away the morning chill. The lake sparkles like it's trying to outdo the sky. You stand, brushing the last of the sand from your cloak. A fish scale sticks to your elbow. You flick it off, but it clings to your finger like a glittery reminder. You glance down the shore. Jesus is there watching you, not in a dramatic way, just like a friend making sure you're okay before he heads out. He lifts a hand in parting. Not a wave, more like a see you when you need me. And just like that he turns and walks away. No fanfare, no exit music, just footprints in the sand gradually fading. You stand for a while longer, letting the warmth soak in. Then someone says, all right, let's go. And you do. Not back to fishing, not really, but back to everything, back to following, back to feeding sheep, back to a life that still smells a little like firewood and grace. The road away from the beach is more of a suggestion than a path, packed earth with the occasional vine reaching across like it's trying to trip someone. You walk slowly, the others near you but not too close, each person sinking into their own sleepy thoughts, like leaves drifting downstream. Your shoulders still carry the ache from last night's failed fishing trip. But now it's joined by something softer, a strange lightness in your chest. Behind you, the lake shimmers like a secret. You don't look back, not because you're avoiding it, but because you're full. Like how you don't need to reread the last sentence of a letter when it's already been folded and sealed in your mind. You kick a stone. It bounces twice and rolls off the side of the road, landing next to a little patch of wild thyme. The smell rises with the morning sun, earthy and sharp and just bitter enough to keep you awake. Ahead, Peter is walking with purpose again. You've seen him walk like this before, when he's trying not to think, which of course means he's thinking very hard. He's got that look like he's rewriting his entire life story in his head, and honestly, so are you. Because how do you explain a breakfast like that? You want to tell someone, but who'd believe it? Hey, the resurrected Son of God made me grilled fish on a beach and gently asked my friend to feed lambs that may or may not be metaphorical. Yeah. Try putting that in a scroll, but then again, maybe someone will. You glance at John, who's been suspiciously quiet and observant. He's walking with that look he gets when he's storing up every detail, like a mental scribe who knows how much words matter. The theologians still debate whether John added this whole beach scene as an epilogue, or if it was always part of the plan. Some even suggest someone else tacked it on, but if you were there, you'd know. This moment was too human, too warm, too fish-scented to be anything but real. The road curves gently inland. You pass a stand of tamarisk trees. A cicada starts up its slow drone like an ancient lullaby. You find yourself thinking back not just to that morning, but to every meal Jesus shared with you. It was always more than just food. Bread, wine, fish, whatever it was, it always came with some kind of soul vitamin, the fire, the questions, the silence. Especially that silence. Remember that moment when everyone was full and no one knew what to say. That holy hush where no one needed to prove anything. That stayed with you more than the words did. You wonder if that's part of what Jesus meant when he said, "Feed my sheep." Not just preach, not just baptize, but show up, make breakfast, listen. Maybe feeding sheep is as simple and as sacred as making sure nobody eats alone. You round a bend and see a small village ahead, just a cluster of homes, a few olive trees swaying sleepily in the breeze. A woman is sweeping her front step with rhythmic precision, dust clouds swirling around her like slow-motion dancers. As you pass, she doesn't say anything, just nods. You nod back. It's a perfect little moment, this connection that means nothing and everything. Because even if she doesn't know who you are or where you've been, you still carry that beach in your bones. You carry the smell of smoke, the feel of warm bread in your hand, the quiet authority of a man who rose from the dead and made breakfast like it was the most natural thing in the world. Someone behind you hiccups. Thomas, again. Probably ate. Too fast. You grin. And suddenly you realize something else. You're not anxious anymore, not about what's next, not about who's in charge, not even about whether you're ready, because it's not about readiness. It never was. It's about willingness, about showing up with your empty net and trusting that someone might fill it. You walk on, lighter now. There's still plenty of road ahead. But there's also bread in your belly, warmth in your memory, and one very clear image in your heart. Jesus, barefoot on the shore, offering breakfast like a quiet invitation to begin again. It's later in the day now, and the sun has found its rhythm, steady, unblinking, and not even slightly apologetic about the heat. You're somewhere between the beach and nowhere in particular, walking roads that don't mind being forgotten. The sandals on your feet are doing that thing where the leather curls at the toe, making you feel one pebble away from barefoot humility. A fly keeps following you. Not a biblical plague-level swarm, just one persistent little buzz that thinks, your ear is a vacation home. You wave it off with all the authority of someone who once saw Jesus calm a storm, but now can't win a fight with a bug. Someone hums behind you. It might be Philip. He's always had a habit of half-singing half-prayers, like he's trying to remind God and himself that the journey is still holy, even when your feet disagree. You pass a fig tree and instinctively look up. Old habits die hard. Every leafy shadow makes you wonder if there's a parable hiding there, waiting to bloom. But no one's cursed this one. It's just a regular tree, doing its quiet figgy thing. You pause under its shade and take a deep breath. The air tastes dry, with just a trace of lake wind left in it, as if the Sea of Galilee still lingers on your tongue. And that's when the hunger hits again. Not real hunger. Not the stomach-growling, breadcrumb-counting kind. But a quieter, deeper ache, the kind that has nothing to do with food and everything to do with wanting another moment like that morning. You can't help it. You replay it again. Jesus, waiting, the fire, the fish, and his voice, not booming. Not theatrical, just steady, personal, like he was talking directly to the sorest spot in your soul. Theologians still argue whether the threefold "do you love me" exchange with Peter was meant to mirror Peter's 3 denials, or if it was more about commissioning him for the work ahead. Some say it was a gentle rebuke, others call it a healing ritual. But if you were there sitting with your toes in the sand and half a fish in your mouth, you'd know. It was both. It was Jesus being surgical and kind all at once. The way only he could be. You think about that fire again. It wasn't just for cooking, it was a safe space, a warm, flickering table where honesty could live. And now that you're walking away from it, the question lingers. What kind of fires will you build? Who will you invite? Your thoughts drift to the others walking with you. Thaddeus has been quiet since breakfast, chewing on something internal. Matthew is making small calculations in his head. You can tell by the way he taps his fingers against his side, like he's counting invisible coins. And Peter keeps glancing at the horizon as if expecting Jesus to pop out from behind a cloud and hand him another metaphor to live by. You pass a small flock of goats. One bleats at you like it's got complaints. Another is chewing something that was probably once edible. A shepherd boy waves lazily from a rock, his feet dangling and his staff looking more decorative than useful. He reminds you of David, before all the politics and psalms and Philistine drama. You nod back at the boy. You wonder if he'll grow up and tell stories like the ones you're collecting now. Or maybe he'll just remember the days some tired men walked by with fish on their breath and a funny look in their eyes, like they'd just eaten grace and weren't sure how to digest it. As the sun begins to lean westward, you notice the shape of your shadow stretching longer on the road. It walks ahead of you, silent and thin, like it's leading the way, and maybe it is, because even though you're technically leaving that breakfast behind, it's following you. In your thoughts, in your steps, in the way your heart no longer feels like it's holding its breath. You reach a crossroads, literally. One path leads toward town, the safe, predictable one. The other curves out toward the hills, into the land of fig trees, sheep trails, and unanswered questions. You don't even hesitate. You take the curve. Not because you know what's out there, but because now, not knowing feels like an invitation. Jesus didn't leave a map. He left stories, conversations, fish. He left you a moment by the fire and a question in your chest. Do you love me? And whether you answer with words or with the path you choose next, the question stays with you. The fire might be cold now, but the call is still warm, and your feet, tired, dusty, blistered feet, somehow feel ready for the next few miles. The air shifts, just slightly, enough for you to notice the breeze is cooler now, whispering through olive branches and carrying with it the faint, lingering scent of charcoal and lake salt. It's the kind of air that tugs gently at your tunic, not enough to change your direction, just enough to remind you you're still moving forward. The hills have softened into low ridges, each one folded into the next, like a crumpled blanket. You're not sure if you've been walking for hours or decades. Time has a way of slipping its sandals off when you're caught between memories and mystery. Andrew clears his throat behind you. It's a small sound, but it echoes like a trumpet in the quiet. You glance back. He doesn't say anything. He just smiles and keeps walking. That's Andrew, steady, unflashy, and somehow always exactly where you need him to be. Up ahead, someone spots a fig vendor with a tiny wooden cart. The wheels are crooked, the figs slightly overripe. You buy two anyway, not because you're hungry, but because sometimes sweetness is worth carrying. As you chew, the texture is soft and a little grainy, the way memories feel when you try to bite down on them. You think about the way Jesus broke the bread that morning. Not ceremoniously, not like he was performing something. Just like a friend who knows you're tired and says, "Here, this will help." There was no miracle that morning. No lightning, no floating. Just fish, fire, and questions that could poke right through your ribs if you let them. And yet, it might have been the most miraculous moment of all, because you didn't need Jesus to raise anyone from the dead right then. You just needed him to sit with you, to feed you, to remind you that even after denial and disappointment and grief that crept into your bones, you still belonged. Theologians still wrestle with what to call that moment. Was it an appearance, a commissioning, a reconciliation scene? You know what it was? It was breakfast, and it was enough. You crest a hill and stop. There's a view now, one of those wide, shoulder-loosening vistas that stretches all the way to the sea. You can just make out the faint curve of the shoreline you left behind. Someone behind you sighs. You don't turn to see who it is. You just let the sound carry you for a bit. You sit down on a sun-warmed rock and let your fig-sticky fingers rest. On your knees, and slowly the weight of everything begins to settle in. Not heavy like a burden, but dense like understanding. That fire Jesus built, he didn't need it. You know that now. He wasn't cold. He didn't need the food. He built it for you, because after everything, after the chaos, the trials, the hiding, the resurrection, you were just some tired fisherman who needed to be reminded of how the whole thing started. With a call, with breakfast, with quiet presence. Jesus could have gone anywhere after rising from the dead. He could have gone straight to Rome, made an entrance, shattered the empire with one look. But instead, he waited on a beach and made breakfast. You stare out at the lake, barely visible now, and wonder what that says about him and what it says about you. You're not a scholar, not a prophet. You're not a warrior or a king. You're a follower who still forgets the point sometimes, who says the wrong thing, who rows in circles in the middle of the night and still hopes that maybe, just maybe, you'll see Jesus on the shore again. And here's the thing, he shows up sometimes in storms, sometimes in locked rooms, but sometimes he shows up with fish and fire and a soft question. Do you love me? You don't always know how to answer, but you're learning, answering with your steps, with your pauses, with the way you stay close to others, even when the road is long and you still smell faintly of brine and charcoal. You brush fig seeds from your lap and stand. It's time to keep walking, not because there's a destination, but because love is something you walk out, not just talk about. And today you're walking it out with a belly full of figs, a pocket full of questions, and the warmth of a beach fire still clinging to your skin like holy dust. Your feet pick up again, rhythm slow and steady. The path narrows as you dip into a small valley where wild thyme grows in chaotic little bursts between the rocks. A goat somewhere nearby sneezes, and for a moment it sounds theological. You laugh under your breath. It's just the kind of moment Jesus would have paused for, just long enough to make a gentle joke and then somehow tie it into the kingdom of heaven. The group has thinned out a bit. Some have wandered off to walk alone, others have paired off. In quiet conversation, you end up beside Thomas, not because either of you planned it, but because your steps seem to sync up naturally. Thomas has the look of someone halfway through thinking something important, but too polite to say it out loud. Finally, after several dozen silent steps, he glances sideways and says, "Do you think he actually ate the fish? Or was it, symbolic?" You snort, not rudely, just with that tired amusement that lives in your gut after a long day of walking and wondering. "Well," you say, "he sure didn't spit it out." Thomas nods, unconvinced but satisfied. You both know the real question isn't about the fish. It's about the realness of it all, the texture of resurrection, the part no one writes down clearly. Theologians still debate whether Jesus' post-resurrection body had full biological function, or if he merely assumed the appearance of eating to comfort the disciples. Some claim he needed to demonstrate continuity between the Jesus they followed and the risen Lord. Others argue the fish was pure metaphor, spiritual nourishment disguised in crispy skin. But you saw the oil sheen on his fingers. You heard him hum between bites. That fish was real, because grace is gritty sometimes. It flakes, it chars, it sticks between your teeth. And oh, how human that was. As you and Thomas keep walking, a hawk circles overhead. You squint up at it, admiring how lazily it rides the wind. No flapping, just gliding. You feel a little jealous. You've been flapping all your life, it seems. Down below, a shepherd girl chases after a runaway lamb. She isn't yelling, just jogging with the tired conviction of someone who's done this before. The lamb skitters into a patch of grass and stops, triumphant. She scoops it up like it's a slightly overgrown baby and pats it once on the head before hauling it back. You and Thomas both stop to watch. You don't need to say it. The parable speaks for itself. She had 99 others, Thomas murmurs. Maybe she needed the walk, you reply, and that's the thing, isn't it? All the parables seem to breathe a little differently now, like they've gone from poetic to personal. When Jesus told them, they felt like stories. Now they feel like your life. The fire by the lake wasn't a stage, it was a lens. Suddenly everything you thought you understood about him, his stories, his silences, his sideways glances, they've all grown skin and started walking with you. The valley floor is soft with sand now, quieter underfoot. A few cicadas begin their lazy afternoon drone. You remember the time Jesus said not to worry about tomorrow. It seemed nice at the time, philosophical, like a proverb your grandmother might sew into a pillow. Now it feels like instruction, not a suggestion, but survival strategy. The kind you cling to when everything has gone sideways, and your faith feels like it's held together with leftover fish bones and hope. You think again of that breakfast, of Peter, of the 3 times Jesus asked him, "Do you love me?" And the 3 replies that weren't poetry, but labor. Feed my lambs. Tend my sheep. Feed my sheep. None of those sound like glamorous jobs. They sound like work. Dusty, loud, underappreciated work. But somehow on that beach it didn't sound like punishment. It sounded like restoration. You suspect that's how Jesus does things. Quiet repair, not loud revenge. Theologians still pass whether Peter was fully reinstated into leadership that morning, or if Jesus was offering a lifelong lesson in humility. Some say it was about forgiveness. Others say it was a commissioning for service. You think it was both, or neither. Or maybe it was just love. Doing what love always does, making breakfast and asking gentle questions. You climb a gentle slope now. Nothing dramatic, just a rise that forces you to lean forward a little. The kind of incline that reminds you you're alive. The kind that slows you down just enough to notice the way the shadows start to stretch longer behind you. At the top, you pause, let the view settle, let your lungs catch up with your legs. You pull a small stone from your sandal and flick it away. It arcs lazily through the air and lands with a poetic little plock against another rock. Somehow it feels sacred. Maybe because now everything does. The air up here feels different. Not cooler exactly, just older, like it remembers things. You've forgotten. The scent of wild sage rides on the breeze, brushing past your face with the same familiarity as an old teacher leaning in with a whisper. The sun has shifted again, now less about light and more about angles. Everything seems backlit, even your memories. You find yourself thinking about that fire again. You weren't even sure what pulled you to the shore that morning. The boat ride had been long and fishless. Your body ached in the way it only does when sleep has been brief and guilt has been long. But there it was, a flicker of flame on the sand, a figure, a voice that knew how to cut through fog, both literal and mental. Children. Have you caught anything? Not friends, not disciples, children. You'd been grown men hauling nets and trauma, and he called you children. It should have felt condescending, but somehow it felt like coming home. Theologians still discuss the choice of words. Some say it reflects affection. Others say it reveals the disciples' spiritual immaturity post-resurrection. Some even argue it was a nod to their need for rebirth. You're not sure. You just remember feeling like he'd seen through your bravado, all. Your big ideas, your declarations, your sword-swinging moments, and decided you still qualified for breakfast. And that was enough. As you crest the ridge, The Sea of Galilee spreads wide beneath you again. It never looks the same twice. Today it gleams like brushed tin. Somewhere out there, the memory of your boat bobs in slow motion. It's strange what sticks in your mind, not the miracles exactly, but the in-betweens, the waiting, the rowing. The silences filled with fish scales and damp rope, and men who didn't know what to say anymore. And then Jesus on the shore, cooking. Who cooks for their friends after being crucified? Only someone who understands that love has to become breakfast, or it risks becoming abstract. You settle into the thought like one would, into a well-worn cushion. Love must become breakfast. That's the kind of theology your sandals can handle. Beside you, someone hums an old tune from their synagogue days. It's out of tune, slightly flat, and absolutely perfect. It nestles itself among the time and the breeze and becomes part of the afternoon. You let your mind drift to the fish. Scholars still speculate what kind it was. Tilapia probably, known locally as St. Peter's fish now, but it didn't have a title back then. Just something the locals netted when the weather held and the market prices didn't drop too low. You remember the way it sizzled on the coals. Jesus didn't even flinch when the oil popped and hissed. He flipped it with a smooth motion, like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Maybe he had. Carpentry makes you precise. Cooking makes you patient. You remember thinking absurdly that the whole scene felt like a parable, except no one spoke in metaphors and no one was taking notes. It wasn't meant to be analyzed. It was meant to be eaten. You chuckle at the idea of someone 2,000 years from now trying to diagram that meal like it's a Greek tragedy. Meanwhile, you were just trying not to cry while chewing. A lizard scurries across your path, pauses, does a few baffling push-ups, then vanishes into the rocks. You feel oddly honored by its performance. The others have caught up again. Someone offers you a piece of dried fig. You accept it with a nod. It's chewy, slightly fermented, and unexpectedly comforting. You glance at the faces around you. These people, all of them, were at the edge of something. Not quite understanding it, not quite ready for what was coming. And still, there at the fire, there in the awkward silence, there in the moment when the resurrected Jesus said, "Come and eat." He didn't say, "Come and explain," or "Come and defend your theology." Just eat. The table was his idea, always has been, and now, as you nibble your fig and look down at the water, you realize the radical hospitality of that moment. Jesus invited deniers, doubters, runners, sinks like a rock types. He cooked for the ones who left him, fed them before they apologized, restored them before they understood. That's not just forgiveness, that's fire-cooked grace, and it smells like wood smoke and breakfast. You sigh, but it comes out more like a prayer, because some part of you still wants to row back to that moment, to that shoreline, to that fire. But another part, the part Jesus touched when he handed you fish without a lecture, knows that the fire comes with you. You carry it now, in your breath, in your questions. In the quiet way you hand someone a crust of bread when you've got just enough for yourself, because maybe that's the real point. Not that Jesus made breakfast once, but that he taught you how. You descend again, following a path worn smooth by centuries of sandal soles and second guesses. Stones press gently through your soles with every step, a holy kind of pressure, like creation reminding you it's still underfoot. And for the first time in a long time, you start to wonder about the silence after breakfast, because no one talks much about that part. There's the miracle of the fish haul, the rekindled fire, the slow chewed grace, Peter's triple, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." All of it gets retold, repreached, requoted. But what happened after the plates were cleared? Well, if there were plates, and the sand cooled, and the sea lapped back into a hush, after the fire settled into glowing coals, and the morning fog had long burned off the lake. What did Jesus say then? Or did he just sit there? Theologians still debate whether this breakfast was part of a larger teaching moment or simply an act of presence. Some argue it was a symbolic passing of leadership. Others insist it was Jesus' gentle way of saying, "I'm still with you, but it won't always look like this." But sitting there on the shore, watching him gaze out at the water, it didn't feel like a lesson. It felt like closure, or maybe prelude. You shift your cloak and keep walking. The trail here is edged by squat olive trees, their gnarled trunks twisted like old knees. You imagine one of the disciples, maybe James, picking up a stick and drawing. Circles in the sand while waiting for someone to speak. Maybe Jesus watched, quietly amused. Or maybe he sat cross-legged with his back to the breeze, savoring that final morning with the kind of peace you can only possess when you've already beaten death, and you're just waiting for your friends to catch up emotionally. The wind tugs your sleeve. You turn to look back, half expecting to see the outline of that smoky little fire again. But of course it's not there, only the sea, and yet something in you whispers, it happened. It happened exactly as you remember it, even if the fish is long gone and the ashes are dust. You think of John, the youngest disciple, the one Jesus loved. He had a way of remembering things with his heart first. He'd later write it all down, of course, in that sprawling scroll of riddles and reflections. But you suspect this moment, this breakfast, was etched deeper than any ink could manage. He'd tell people, "We knew it was the Lord." That was the phrase. None of us dared ask. That line always struck you. None of us dared ask, as if asking would have broken something delicate. Like the spell would lift and Jesus would disappear, leaving only 7 men with fish grease on their fingers and half a loaf of bread to split. Maybe that's what holiness is. Not thunder and angels, but the hush that settles when you realize love is sitting beside you and you don't want to mess it up by speaking. You pause at a flat stone under a fig tree and take a seat. Not because you're tired, though you are, but because it feels right. Sometimes you just have to sit, to notice the lazy stretch of a sunbeam across your knees, to feel the cool press of stone under your thighs, to let the memory of crackling fire and flaking fish become part of your bloodstream. A bee hovers by your elbow, then moves on without incident. Even the bees respect the mood today. You recall how Jesus broke the bread that morning, the way his fingers folded over it, not rushed, not performative, just simple, familiar. And you remember Peter sitting too straight, like a kid trying not to flinch at a parent-teacher meeting. He didn't even reach for seconds. He just waited to be forgiven, waited to be told he still had a job in the kingdom, waited for something, anything, to erase the sound of that rooster from his soul. And Jesus, of course, didn't erase it. He replaced it. 3 denials. 3 questions, 3 commissions. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Feed my lambs, tend my sheep, feed my sheep. You whisper the rhythm to yourself like a lullaby. It's not poetry, it's policy, a job description wrapped in redemption. You've heard people argue that Jesus' questions were word games, different Greek words for love, meant to test Peter's sincerity. Maybe, maybe not. Theologians still debate the nuance. You remember the tone? It was soft. Like Jesus already knew the answer and just needed Peter to say it out loud. Like the words weren't for Jesus at all. They were for Peter and maybe for you. Because you've denied him too. Not with cursing or campfires, but with busyness. With excuses. With your own flavor of fear. And still breakfast. Still grace that smells like grilled tilapia and wood smoke. Still Jesus on the sand, asking if you love him. You do. At least you're trying to. And maybe that's enough for today. The shade thickens here as you pass through a grove of tamarisk trees, rare but rooted. Their feathered branches wave lazily, in the heat, casting shadows that ripple like water. You duck beneath one and find yourself pacing slower, not because you're tired, but because your mind is lingering on that post-breakfast quiet. You wonder how long they sat there, those disciples. Not just full of fish, but full of the ache of second chances. Did anyone laugh? Did anyone cry? Or was it just that full belly, warm, light kind of silence, the kind that doesn't ask for words because presence is enough? And what about Thomas? He doesn't get mentioned in John's account of the breakfast, but you imagine he was there, probably standing off to the side, eyes squinting toward the horizon like he's waiting for another miracle to land in his lap. Thomas had questions. You respect that. He wanted to touch the wounds, see the hands, check the receipts. Theologians still debate whether doubt is the opposite of faith or its twin in disguise. You're starting to think it's just a different doorway into the same room. Some walk in singing, some crawl in questioning. Either way, they end up at the same fire. And here's the strange part. Jesus always met them there, not with charts or lectures, but with presence. He let Thomas touch him, let Peter talk it out, let the others just eat. It's not flashy leadership, it's not what you'd expect from the king of the universe, but it's exactly what your weary heart wants most. Someone who sees your tangled thoughts and sits down anyway. As you bend to tie your sandal, you notice the tiniest lizard perched on a rock nearby. It blinks slowly, not threatened, not impressed. Just there. You smile and nod as if to say, yeah, me too. There's a holy smallness in moments like this, not the kind that belittles, but the kind that grounds you, reminds you that you're part of something ancient and ongoing, that your doubts, like Thomas's, aren't disqualifications, they're invitations. Invitations to lean in, to warm your hands by the fire, to break the bread, even when your questions haven't all been answered. A gust of wind carries the scent of salt and something else, something earthy. Maybe lentils, maybe memory. You reach the edge of the grove and find a low wall half crumbled, probably Roman. You sit on it, stretching your legs, eyes half closed. The heat is gentle now, like an old friend's hand on your shoulder. And you think of Peter again. Jesus didn't call him the rock because he was solid. Not yet, anyway. Peter was impulsive, emotional, prone to overpromising and underthinking. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Jesus saw the future in Peter's failures, saw the sermons that would rise from the ashes of his shame, saw the thousands who'd come to faith because Peter first learned what it meant to fall flat and get back up again. There's something comforting about that. You've fallen flat too, sometimes in public, sometimes in ways no one else knows. But you, and yet fish, fire, forgiveness, it's a pattern now. You start to see it everywhere in the Gospels, the cycle of failure followed by feast. The habit Jesus had of turning human mess into divine invitation. He didn't erase the mistake. He fed it breakfast. The wall under you shifts slightly, disturbed by a passing breeze, or maybe a passing thought. You touch its surface and feel the grooves of ancient chisel work, still stubborn after centuries. Someone made this. Someone shaped this stone long before you arrived, thinking it would hold something important. Maybe it did. Maybe it still does. You stand again, dusting your robe, and resume the path. It loops gently toward a low bluff overlooking the lake. From here you can see far, boats like beetles on the water, gulls suspended on invisible currents, the curve of the shoreline where the fire once burned. And beneath that memory, the deeper one, a man you loved, who fed you even when you'd veiled him, a friend who didn't flinch at your doubt, a savior who chose breakfast over blame. The sky is shifting now, light turning soft and gold. Evening is stretching its limbs, and you, slow stepping down toward a world still full of firewood and forgiveness, are ready to carry the story forward, not as a sermon, but as a scent, a trace of fish and bread and healing, clinging to your sleeves like smoke. Not everything needs explaining. Some things just need retelling, and you were there. Down you go, one sandy step at a time, toward the water's edge. The Sea of Galilee has that late-day shimmer now, the kind of glow that makes you squint and smile at the same time. Everything looks like it's been gently brushed with olive oil, soft, golden, quiet. You pause near a reed patch and listen. The wind hushes over the grass. Somewhere a frog bleats, lazily, like it has no real complaints. And beneath it all, the slow lap of water against stone, like the sea itself is breathing through its nose. This is the part of the story no one rushes to teach in Sunday school. The afterglow, the fire's gone cold. The miracle hall is packed away or eaten. Jesus has walked on, not disappeared, just stepped into the next part of his post-resurrection mystery tour. And now it's just a them. 7 disciples, maybe a few curious birds, a couple of stunned fish skeletons, and an odd, lingering sense that something very holy just happened. But no one's quite sure what to do next. You ease yourself down beside a smooth boulder. Warm from the sun, press your palm against it. Let it steady you. This is what it must have felt like, sitting there as the breeze shifted and Jesus was suddenly, gently, not there anymore. They were used to him disappearing by now. Locked doors, dusty roads, open skies. He came and went like the wind, but still, it stung every time. Theologians still debate why Jesus didn't just stick around full-time after the resurrection. Why not a few more miracles? Why not a solid 40-day seminar? But maybe he knew something they didn't yet. That sometimes the space he leaves behind is where the real faith begins to bloom. That lingering scent of charcoal. That echo of his voice saying, "Follow me." That moment you catch yourself scanning the horizon for him, even when you know he's gone. You look around. If this were a movie, now's when the music would swell. Strings and soft percussion, and Peter would stand up dramatically, eyes blazing with newfound purpose. Cue montage of him traveling, preaching, healing, turning the world upside down. But life doesn't always score itself so neatly. They probably stood there awkwardly, wondering who was supposed to do the dishes. Maybe Andrew kicked sand over the fire. Maybe John asked if they should go back to the boat. Maybe no one spoke at all, afraid the sound of their voice would break the fragile spell. And you would have just sat there a little longer, not because you didn't believe, but because you weren't quite ready to move. Because when someone like Jesus shares breakfast with you, you don't sprint off like it's just another Tuesday. You linger, even now. You linger in the memory. You recall the way his hands moved, so precise, so unhurried. The way his gaze skimmed the water as if it still held secrets. The way he said, "Simon, son of John," like he was addressing both the man and the boy he used to be. You wonder, what if you were in Peter's sandals? You've had your share of denials, not shouted over courtyard fires maybe, but whispered in small moments of cowardice. Times you stayed silent when you could have spoken grace. Times you chose comfort over conviction. Times you convinced yourself that doubt meant disqualification. But Jesus, he still made breakfast, still looked you in the eyes and asked, "Do you love me?" And not in a guilt-trippy way. In a slow, restorative rhythm, like waves nudging the shore. Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Then feed, not fight, not prove, not impress. Feed lambs, sheep, stragglers, weirdos, doubters. Sleepy followers like you run your fingers along the boulder's edge, tracing a tiny crack filled with moss. Even rocks change over time. So do people. So did Peter. So did you. You push to your feet and take a step closer to the water, letting it kiss your toes. It's cold, playful, full of yesterday's echoes. Somewhere out on the horizon, another boat rocks gently. You imagine it's full of fishermen, not saints, not scholars, just tired folks hauling nets and hoping for one good catch. Maybe they'll see someone on shore waving. Maybe they'll haul in something miraculous. Maybe breakfast is already sizzling on some hidden fire. And maybe they'll know, without daring to ask, that it's the Lord. The water swirls around your ankles now, small. Waves tugging at the hem of your robe like a sleepy toddler, unsure whether it wants your attention or just a nap. You squint into the brightness and imagine, not for the first time, what it must have been like to see that shoreline from the boat. That liminal moment, the stranger on the sand, the flicker of recognition, the sudden leap into the sea. Peter didn't wait, didn't check if he could swim fast enough, didn't worry about soaking his clothes or how absurd it looked to abandon 6 guys with a net full of flopping fish. He just jumped. There's something so wonderfully reckless about that, and something deeply familiar too. You've jumped before, into friendships, into plans, into messes you thought were miracles, and miracles you thought were messes. And sometimes, like Peter, you landed right at the feet of Jesus, dripping and gasping, but somehow exactly where you needed to be. Theologians still debate what drove Peter to leap. Was it guilt, love, desperation, pure instinct? Maybe it was. All of that stirred together with a kind of heart-level gravity, something that pulls you when words won't do. You wade out a bit further, careful not to slip on the smooth stones underfoot. The water is clearer than you'd expect, blue and clean, but with a million particles shimmering just beneath the surface. Like grace. You think again about that moment on the beach, the bread, the fish, the way Jesus didn't bring up the denial right away, didn't make it a teachable moment, just cooked, served. Let Peter dry off and eat. Only after that came the questions, and not even questions about theology or leadership potential. Just, do you love me? It's the kind of question that undoes you, because it doesn't ask for credentials. It doesn't demand an apology first. It bypasses the resume and the regret and goes straight to the core. Do you love me? And if you say yes, however shakily, however sheepishly, he hands you the assignment. Feed my sheep. You stare at the water and wonder what that means, really. Feed them what? Fish? Words? Patience? Probably all 3, because sheep aren't known for being low maintenance. They wander, they whine, they occasionally get their heads stuck in fences or their hooves tangled in their own wool. Sound familiar? You laugh a little, quietly. The kind of laugh that rumbles more in your chest than your throat. Jesus didn't tell Peter to fix the sheep, or control them, or impress them with sermons and spreadsheets. Just feed them. With what? With whatever you've got. Your attention, your mistakes, your loaves and fishes, even if they don't look like enough, especially when they don't look like enough. You take a few steps back toward dry sand and sit again, this time cross-legged, elbows on your knees. The breeze has picked up just slightly. You let it tangle your hair, let it carry the scent of far-off fig trees and the faintest whisper of ash from an old fire. Funny how Jesus never really asked for a big cathedral or a polished plan. He seemed to prefer breakfast and barefoot disciples. He seemed to think love was enough to build a kingdom on. And the more you think about it, the more you're starting to believe him. You tilt your head and imagine the conversation again. Not as a spectator, now but as a participant, you beside the fire. You staring into those eyes, you hearing your name spoken with zero shame. Do you love me? And in that moment all the lists and failures and theological tightropes fall away, and the answer that rises is simple. Yes, Lord. You know I do. Then the assignment comes, not loud, not heavy, just a quiet next step. Feed my sheep. You don't need a degree, or a pulpit, or a perfect past, just willingness, and maybe a spare loaf of bread. The sun is melting lower now, sliding behind distant hills, like a coin sinking in oil. Everything glows, everything hums, and you feel full, not just from imaginary fish, but from the stillness, from the memory, from the strange and sacred peace of being loved more than you can explain. You press your hands into the sand and let your fingers find cool patches where the sun didn't reach. You remember what he said, follow me, and somehow, after everything, after the fire and the fish and the silence and the stumble, you still want to, even if you're limping, even if you're laughing, even if you're still learning what love means when it's shaped like a question and tastes like grilled tilapia. Down you go, one sandy step at a time, toward the water's edge. The Sea of Galilee has that late-day shimmer now, the kind of glow that makes you squint and smile at the same time. Everything looks like it's been gently brushed with olive oil, soft, golden, quiet. You pause near a reed patch and listen. The wind hushes over the grass. Somewhere a frog bleats, lazily, like it has no real complaints. And beneath it all, the slow lap of water against stone, like the sea itself is breathing through its nose. This is the part of the story no one rushes to teach in Sunday school. The afterglow, the fire's gone cold. The miracle hall is packed away or eaten. Jesus has walked on, not disappeared, just stepped into the next part of his post-resurrection mystery tour. And now it's just a them. 7 disciples, maybe a few curious birds, a couple of stunned fish skeletons, and an odd, lingering sense that something very holy just happened. But no one's quite sure what to do next. You ease yourself down beside a smooth boulder. Warm from the sun, press your palm against it. Let it steady you. This is what it must have felt like, sitting there as the breeze shifted and Jesus was suddenly gently not there anymore. They were used to him disappearing by now. Locked doors, dusty roads, open skies. He came and went like the wind, but still, it stung every time. Theologians still debate why Jesus didn't just stick around full-time after the resurrection. Why not a few more miracles? Why not a solid 40-day seminar? But maybe he knew something they didn't yet. That sometimes the space he leaves behind is where the real faith begins to bloom. That lingering scent of charcoal, that echo of his voice saying, "Follow me." That moment you catch yourself scanning the horizon for him, even when you know he's gone. You look around. If this were a movie, now's when the music would swell. Strings and soft percussion, and Peter would stand up dramatically, eyes blazing with newfound purpose. Cue montage of him traveling, preaching, healing, turning the world upside down. But life doesn't always score itself so neatly. They probably stood there awkwardly, wondering who was supposed to do the dishes. Maybe Andrew kicked sand over the fire. Maybe John asked if they should go back to the boat. Maybe no one spoke at all, afraid the sound of their voice would break the fragile spell. And you would have just sat there a little longer, not because you didn't believe, but because you weren't quite ready to move. Because when someone like Jesus shares breakfast with you, you don't sprint off like it's just another Tuesday. You linger, even now. You linger in the memory. You recall the way his hands moved, so precise, so unhurried. The way his gaze skimmed the water as if it still held secrets. The way he said, "Simon, son of John," like he was addressing both the man and the boy he used to be. You wonder, what if you were in Peter's sandals? You've had your share of denials, not shouted over courtyard fires maybe, but whispered in small moments of cowardice. Times you stayed silent when you could have spoken grace. Times you chose comfort over conviction. Times you convinced yourself that doubt meant disqualification. But Jesus, he still made breakfast, still looked you in the eyes and asked, "Do you love me?" And not in a guilt-trippy way, in a slow, restorative rhythm, like waves nudging the shore. "Do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me?" Then feed, not fight, not prove, not impress. Feed lambs, sheep, stragglers, weirdos, doubters. Sleepy followers like you run your fingers along the boulder's edge, tracing a tiny crack filled with moss. Even rocks change over time. So do people. So did Peter. So did you. You push to your feet and take a step closer to the water, letting it kiss your toes. It's cold, playful, full of yesterday's echoes. Somewhere out on the horizon, another boat rocks gently. You imagine it's full of fishermen, not saints, not scholars, just tired folks hauling nets and hoping for one good catch. Maybe they'll see someone on shore waving. Maybe they'll haul in something miraculous. Maybe breakfast is already sizzling on some hidden fire. And maybe they'll know, without daring to ask, that it's the Lord. The water swirls around your ankles now, small, Waves tugging at the hem of your robe like a sleepy toddler, unsure whether it wants your attention or just a nap. You squint into the brightness and imagine, not for the first time, what it must have been like to see that shoreline from the boat. That liminal moment, the stranger on the sand, the flicker of recognition, the sudden leap into the sea. Peter didn't wait, didn't check if he could swim fast enough, didn't worry about soaking his clothes or how absurd it looked to abandon 6 guys with a net full of flopping fish. He just jumped. There's something so wonderfully reckless about that, and something deeply familiar too. You've jumped before, into friendships, into plans, into messes you thought were miracles, and miracles you thought were messes. And sometimes, like Peter, you landed right at the feet of Jesus, dripping and gasping, but somehow exactly where you needed to be. Theologians still debate what drove Peter to leap. Was it guilt, love, desperation, pure instinct? Maybe it was. All of that stirred together with a kind of heart-level gravity, something that pulls you when words won't do. You wade out a bit further, careful not to slip on the smooth stones underfoot. The water is clearer than you'd expect, blue and clean, but with a million particles shimmering just beneath the surface. Like grace. You think again about that moment on the beach, the bread, the fish, the way Jesus didn't bring up the denial right away, didn't make it a teachable moment, just cooked, served, let Peter dry off and eat. Only after that came the questions, and not even questions about theology or leadership potential. Just, do you love me? It's the kind of question that undoes you, because it doesn't ask for credentials. It doesn't demand an apology first. It bypasses the resume and the regret and goes straight to the core. Do you love me? And if you say yes, however shakily, however sheepishly, he hands you the assignment. Feed my sheep. You stare at the water and wonder what that means, really. Feed them what? Fish? Words? Patience? Probably all 3, because sheep aren't known for being low maintenance. They wander, they whine, they occasionally get their heads stuck in fences or their hooves tangled in their own wool. Sound familiar? You laugh a little, quietly. The kind of laugh that rumbles more in your chest than your throat. Jesus didn't tell Peter to fix the sheep, or control them, or impress them with sermons and spreadsheets. Just feed them. With what? With whatever you've got. Your attention, your mistakes, your loaves and fishes, even if they don't look like enough, especially when they don't look like enough. You take a few steps back toward dry sand and sit again, this time cross-legged, elbows on your knees. The breeze has picked up just slightly. You let it tangle your hair, let it carry the scent of far-off fig trees and the faintest whisper of ash from an old fire. Funny how Jesus never really asked for a big cathedral or a polished plan. He seemed to prefer breakfast and barefoot disciples. He seemed to think love was enough to build a kingdom on. And the more you think about it, the more you're starting to believe him. You tilt your head and imagine the conversation again. Not as a spectator, now but as a participant, you beside the fire. You staring into those eyes, you hearing your name spoken with zero shame. Do you love me? And in that moment all the lists and failures and theological tightropes fall away, and the answer that rises is simple. Yes, Lord. You know I do. Then the assignment comes, not loud, not heavy, just a quiet next step. Feed my sheep. You don't need a degree, or a pulpit, or a perfect past, just willingness, and maybe a spare loaf of bread. The sun is melting lower now, sliding behind distant hills, like a coin sinking in oil. Everything glows, everything hums, and you feel full, not just from imaginary fish, but from the stillness, from the memory, from the strange and sacred peace of being loved more than you can explain. You press your hands into the sand and let your fingers find cool patches where the sun didn't reach. You remember what he said, "Follow me," and somehow, after everything, after the fire and the fish and the silence and the stumble, You still want to, even if you're limping, even if you're laughing, even if you're still learning what love means when it's shaped like a question and tastes like grilled tilapia. Somewhere just out of view, a gull calls once, then glides off, lazy and aimless, like it has no appointment but still wants to look busy. You watch it disappear into the golden blur of the sky and think, this, right here, is where the gospel feels most like a lullaby, not shouted, not inscribed in stone, just lived quietly around a morning fire. You lean back on your elbows, letting the earth hold your weight. The disciples must have done the same after Jesus left. No rush, no map. Just 7 men marinating in mystery, trying not to blink too hard in case he came back again. You wonder what they talked about once the fire cooled. Did Peter apologize for cannonballing out of the boat? Did Thomas admit he'd quietly counted the fish twice? Did someone, probably Bartholomew, try to make a joke to lighten the moment and absolutely bomb? It must have been a strange in-between, no longer panicked, but not yet propelled. Theologians still debate what those 40 post-resurrection days really meant, why Jesus appeared the way he did, why he didn't show up to more people, why he cooked instead of delivering another sermon on a hilltop. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the kingdom isn't always built on big speeches and booming miracles. Maybe sometimes it's built over coals and silence, with crumbs on your robe and fish oil on your fingers. You stretch your legs out in front of you and rub a stubborn pebble from your heel. It's easy to think faith always needs to be bold, loud, world-changing. But this moment, this quiet recollection on the beach, it's doing something to you. It's softening the hustle, slowing your breath, reminding you that God isn't always in the whirlwind. Sometimes he's in the breakfast. Peter must have realized it too, that the call to feed my sheep wasn't a summons to grand gestures. It was a call to consistency, to care, to noticing, the way Jesus noticed the empty nets before anyone asked, the way he noticed Peter's shame before Peter found the words, the way he broke the silence, not with a lecture, but with a meal. You close your eyes and picture it again. Not the flashy parts, not the moment of recognition, but the ordinary ones, the sound of fish sizzling, the steam rising off bread, the way Jesus probably cracked a smile when John said the fish were overcooked. You imagine his hands, scarred but steady, passing. Food, not judgment. And in those hands, everything ordinary became holy. You think of your own hands, the errands they've run, the mistakes they've made, the things they've built, held, dropped, cleaned, clutched. You wonder, what could these hands feed? Not just literally, though maybe that too. A neighbor's dinner, a friend's coffee, a stranger's dignity, but maybe also encouragement, time, gentle truths, questions that feel like permission instead of pop quizzes. You pick up a twig and draw slow loops in the sand, like you're writing something only God needs to read. You're not ready to go yet, not quite. This moment, imagined or not, has rooted itself in you. This beach, these embers, this version of Jesus, calm, playful, earthy. It's a kind of quiet theology, all its own, not meant for textbooks, just for tired people like you. So, you sit a little longer, because this doesn't feel like the kind of moment you rush. And if anyone were to ask what you're doing, you'd probably shrug and say, just feeding the sheep. Which on some days looks a lot like sitting still and remembering how it all smelled, how it sounded, how it felt to be found without asking. You smile, soft and sideways, and let the image settle like a weighted blanket over your thoughts. Somewhere far off, a new day is beginning for someone else, but here now you're still with him, still by the fire, still loved, still enough. The breeze sighs through the reeds now, like it's had a long day too. It rustles soft and low, less like wind and more. Like a lullaby you've always half remembered. You lie back fully, letting the earth take your full weight, staring up at a sky that's slowly changing color. Fewer blues now, more amber and lavender, like someone spilled honey over a page of faded parchment. The Sea of Galilee laps gently at the shore, unbothered by your presence. And why would it be? You're just one more disciple, really. One more soul stretched out on the edge of something holy, blinking into eternity and wondering if breakfast is enough to change a life. Turns out, it is. That meal, quiet as it was, echoes louder than most sermons. Jesus knew what he was doing. No thunderclaps, no heavenly harps, just warm fish, coarse bread, and a question that still reverberates. Do you love me? Theologians still debate why he asked 3 times. Maybe to mirror Peter's 3 denials. Maybe to give him 3 chances to heal. Maybe because sometimes love needs repetition, needs marination, needs time to settle into the bones. You know what that's like. You've had your own denials, those moments you looked away when you could have leaned in, the small betrayals, the quiet hesitations. You've stood in Peter's sandals more than once, salt-stung and wordless, hoping grace would outrun your shame, and somehow it always does. You think about how patient Jesus was. He didn't interrupt, didn't correct Peter's answers, didn't make him grovel or fill out a repentance form in triplicate. He just asked, waited, listened, then handed him a mission. There's something scandalously gentle about that, something that doesn't make sense unless you've known real mercy, the kind that doesn't erase your past, but rewrites it in a different font, softer, quieter, still legible, but no longer defined by its boldest errors. You close your eyes again and try to hear the fire. Not just see it, not just smell it, but hear it. The occasional crackle, the shifting of sand beneath someone's foot, the low murmur of voices trying to find a new normal. Imagine being Peter, hair still dripping, cheeks still flushed, and hearing those words, "Feed my sheep." What a strange instruction. He could have said, start a church, lead a movement, write a best-selling scroll, but no, just feed them. As if the whole point of grace was not to elevate, but to nourish. You roll the thought around in your mind like a smooth stone, to nourish, not impress, not control, not win, just nourish. You think of people you've known who've done that well. The friend who remembered your weird tea order when you forgot your own name. The aunt who sent cards for holidays no one else celebrated. The teacher who stayed behind to make sure you understood long division, or at least didn't feel stupid trying. That's sheep feeding. Small gestures, tenderly offered. Maybe that's all Jesus ever wanted from Peter, and from you. You open your eyes again and trace clouds with your gaze, each one like a drifting psalm with no punctuation, just sacred fluff and sun-warmed theology. And maybe, just maybe, this is what holiness feels like. Not a sermon, not a thunderbolt, just a nap on a beach where God once grilled fish for friends who'd failed him. A place where shame didn't get the final word. Breakfast did. The sand is cool beneath your palms now, and you scoop some into your fist. Let it fall slowly. Grain by grain, you whisper into the hush, not loud, just enough for the wind to carry it like a prayer you're still learning how to say, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." And somewhere deep inside, the fire crackles again. Not for judgment, for cooking, for communion, for home. The beach is almost empty now, except for you and the memory. The shadows have stretched themselves long and lazy across the sand, and even the gulls seem to have clocked out for the day. You breathe in through your nose, slow and deliberate, letting the sea air settle somewhere behind your eyes. You sit up, one last time, knees drawn loosely to your chest. The embers have gone quiet. A few orange threads linger like shy stars hiding behind ash. Someone probably kicked sand over the coals, snuffed out the smoke. The breakfast is over. The Savior's gone. Again. But the silence doesn't sting the way it used to. You aren't alone, not really. You've been fed. You've been asked to love. And in that odd, unceremonious goodbye, Jesus gave you a commission wrapped in the simplest linen. Care for each other. No pomp. No altar. Just beach breath and morning bread, and this is where we wind down now, you and me. This sandy edge of scripture, this gentle postscript to resurrection. It didn't make the flashy paintings, it didn't turn into a feast day. But it lingers longer than most miracles, maybe because it's one of the few moments where we see Jesus simply being human, hungry, hospitable, holy in the quiet way. Theologians still debate why this story matters so much, why the risen Christ chose a beach picnic instead of a throne room, why Peter, soggy and stunned, became the rock of a church that would wobble its way through history. But maybe we don't need the answers tonight. Maybe it's enough to lie back now, arms splayed like an exhale, and remember this. Faith doesn't always march. Sometimes it meanders. Sometimes it smells like fish and wood smoke and salt air. Sometimes it asks questions instead of handing out declarations. Sometimes it cooks for you before it corrects you. Sometimes it lets you drift a little before it calls you back to shore. You close your eyes. Let your breathing match the sea. Slow in, slow out. Let your muscles sink into the ground. Your thoughts curl around the edges of the morning story like steam rising from a clay plate. Let go of the questions for now. Let go of the trying, the planning, the second-guessing. You're here, and that's enough. You picture Jesus, barefoot, humming something under his breath as he brushes ash off his robe. Maybe he winks at you. Maybe he just nods. Either way, you're seen. The kind of scene that doesn't need fixing first. The kind of scene that remembers your name, even when you forget how to say it. There's no sermon left tonight. No verses to memorize. Just a soft invitation to rest in the truth that started all this in the first place. You are loved, you are wanted, you are welcome by the fire. Let that be the last thought for now. Let it stretch out like the tide. Let it rock you, not with crashing waves, but with the slow pull of peace. Let your breath deepen. Let your thoughts scatter like breadcrumbs. Let the silence do its sacred work. Sleep now. Sleep easy. You've been fed. End of section 15. Final wind down. If you'd like another full script or have a new topic in mind, just say the word.